I'm very happy to be able to speak about this book, Mobilizing Money for the Common Good. It's a book that looks at a critical problem in economic and social history. How do you gather and then lend out sums of capital for small artisans, merchants, people who are not on the upper ranks of society, also not necessarily on the lower ranks of society. And this is really a critical part of capital formation and economic development. And what we have here then is a study that looks at, in a sense, what you could almost think of as institutions which lie in between. And these are, in many cases, religious institutions, but hospitals, orphanages, confraternities, so religious but also lay. And what we find is that in the early modern period, it's institutions like this, often established and populated by the very merchants and professionals who are also going to be benefiting from them. These are the ones who establish new forms of both gathering capital and then lending it out to people of the middle and say lower ranks of society, as a way to allow them to deal either with business opportunities or with life cycle crises. And what we find is that these kinds of institutions and this form of small lending is really something that we find across Europe. The focus in this book is really three places, primarily Italy, the Netherlands, and Spain. We do find it in other places, perhaps most developed in these three though. And what we see then is that they are able to develop at this critical period the forms that allow them to develop these kind of lending apparatuses, often based on a concept of the common good. And the common good then is something which legitimates the donation of money to these institutions, and it legitimates these institutions also making that money available to others. There's so a very strong focus on the common good, but there's also, as we see in some of these essays, there's also a darker side, because the common good means that there are some people who are considered to be uncommon, and they are considered to be bad. And really in this case, in the case of capital accumulation and lending at small interest rates or small amounts at small interest rates, it's the Jews who are singled out, who are often then castigated as being enemies of society, and who are often then forced out. And the very forces which lead to the expansion of these charitable institutions that create and lend out capital are often the same religious forces that lead to the expulsion of the Jews from European cities. So this is the dynamic that's going on in this book and the essays in this book, and we look at the various forms, the legal forms, the charitable forms, the institutional forms that go into the process of gathering and distributing that money. And I think the other thing that's worth saying is that this is a book in itself, but it's also a book in a series of research projects, conferences, and books that have been produced by the Monte della Fondazione of Bologna, an institution which for decades now has devoted itself to doing further research into precisely this nexus that we're talking about, and to seeing how this part of early modern economic history actually takes shape and expands through the early modern period and has an enormous influence in history generally. So, thanks very much.